After the Arab Spring toppled Egypt's dictator last year, several American organizations went to Cairo to teach democracy to a society planning its first free elections. Now, several of those Americans are being charged in Egypt with inciting recent protests against the military council that runs the country. Concern at the White House is growing, and Nora O'Donnell is there with more on that. Nora?
Scott, and the White House said today that these Americans have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are in Egypt to promote democracy, human rights, and fair elections, and that is no reason to investigate them. As stone-throwing protesters clashed with Egyptian police today, 17 Americans are facing charges of encouraging the unrest that has engulfed the country for nearly a year. One of them is the son of Ray LaHood, President Obama's transportation secretary. Sam LaHood heads the Egypt office for the International Republican Institute and is now forbidden to leave Cairo. So were you surprised when you saw your name on the list?
I was surprised. So was my wife.
Other Americans like Charles Dunn were safely at home in Washington, D.C. when the charges were announced. As a director of the pro-democracy group Freedom House, Dunn was cited for operating in the country without a license. The Egyptian government is accusing you and others of fomenting some of this unrest that is plaguing Egypt.
Right. Of course, we're doing nothing of the kind. I mean, these are completely trumped up political charges.
If convicted, the Americans could face up to 5 years in prison. And today, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney indicated that $1.5 billion in U.S. foreign aid to Egypt could now be in jeopardy.
I think we have made clear, both in our public statements and in our private communications, how seriously we take this, and that these actions could have consequences for our relationship and for our assistance programs.
And of those 17 Americans charged, we are learning new details about their whereabouts, Scott. About half of them were actually able to leave Egypt before these charges were announced, but the rest of them, they're stuck in Egypt. And some of them, including Sam LaHood, are holed up inside the U.S. Embassy in Cairo.
In the U.S. Embassy, they're beyond the reach of the Egyptian authorities. Nora, I wonder, when we see Jay Carney at the briefing talking about withholding aid to Egypt, how significant is that?
It's extremely significant. And of course, Egypt has been a critical ally in the Middle East for decades. But last year, for the first time, Congress said no more blank checks to Egypt. And they put some conditions on the more than $1 billion in aid we send Egypt. Well, now Egypt has to comply with those pro-reform conditions. And that's why the State Department, the Obama administration, everybody's saying, look, if Egypt doesn't comply, if they continue to investigate these Americans, prevent them from leaving the country, that aid is on the line. Scott.
Nora, thanks very much.